the tragic fate of women captured in Apache conflicts. Smoke curled gently from the hearths, and the morning air was filled with the scent of fresh earth and dried herbs. Among the huts, women moved quietly, preparing for the day. They carried baskets filled with corn, beans, and other foods, humming soft songs as they went. Their voices blended with the wind, creating a melody that seemed as old as the land itself. Nava, a young woman of about 17, walked through the village carrying a small bundle of dried herbs. She paused to greet her neighbor, smiling warmly as she exchanged news about the upcoming harvest. Her hair, dark and long, was tied back with a simple leather band, and her clothes, made of soft deerskin, allowed her to move freely. She loved mornings like this, when the world seemed calm and life felt simple. Nearby, another woman, Satira, was tending to a fire, carefully roasting seeds for breakfast. Satira was older than Nava, perhaps in her late 20s, and she had already become a mother. Her small child, a boy of 3, played at her feet, laughing as he chased a butterfly. Satira's eyes often drifted to the horizon, where the hills rose and fell like waves frozen in time. She felt a deep connection to the land, knowing that it had sustained her ancestors for generations. Across the village, a group of women gathered near the river to fetch water. The river's gentle flow reflected the morning sky, shimmering like silver. As they filled their clay pots, they spoke softly to one another, sharing stories of dreams, hopes, and sometimes fears. Among them was Lela, a young mother with a quiet strength. She watched her baby nestled in a woven sling against her chest, marveling at the tiny hands and feet that seemed so fragile yet full of life. The village thrived on cooperation and mutual respect. Each person had a role, and every contribution mattered. Men and older boys often went hunting or tending to the animals, while women cultivated the land, prepared food, and cared for the children. Yet the women's work was not just practical. It was also the thread that held the community together. Through songs, stories, and rituals, they passed down knowledge of the plants, the seasons, and the spirits that lived in the land. Nava loved the stories the elders told in the evenings. She would sit by the fire, listening intently as the older women spoke of the ancestors, of brave warriors, and of women who had once guided entire villages. The stories painted pictures of courage, wisdom, and resilience. They taught her the value of kindness, the importance of respect, and the strength of community. Though she was young, Nava often imagined herself in those stories, feeling the power of generations flowing through her. That morning, after greeting neighbors and helping with chores, Nava wandered to the edge of the village, where the tall grasses swayed in the wind. She loved this quiet place, away from the busy village, where she could think and watch the world. Birds flitted between the branches, and small animals rustled in the underbrush. The land seemed alive, filled with secrets and stories waiting to be discovered. Satira, meanwhile, called her child to her side. They sat together, eating the simple meal of roasted seeds and corn cakes. She felt a sense of peace as she watched him chew and smile. For Satira, these moments were precious. Life could be unpredictable, and she knew that happiness was often found in these small, everyday moments. She often thought about the stories her mother had told her, of women who had faced hardships with courage. She hoped that she, too, could face whatever challenges might come, with patience and strength. Lela and the other women returned from the river, their pots full of clear, cool water. They poured the water into larger containers for cooking and washing, humming softly as they worked. The rhythm of their movements, combined with the gentle sounds of the river, created a peaceful harmony. Children followed them, giggling and playing, chasing each other around the village. The air was filled with life, and the village seemed to breathe as one. Despite the calm and beauty of the morning, there was always a sense of awareness among the villagers. The world beyond their lands was changing. Settlers and soldiers had been moving closer each year, bringing with them new laws, new ways of life, and sometimes fear. Though nothing had directly affected the village yet, the women often spoke in hushed tones about what might come. They taught their children to be observant, to respect the land, and to trust their instincts. In the afternoon, Nava and Satara joined a group of women working in the fields. The sun was high, and the air was warm. They bent over the soil, planting seeds, pulling weeds, and tending to young shoots. As they worked, they shared stories and laughter, creating a sense of camaraderie. The work was hard, but it was meaningful. Each seed they planted was a promise of life, a symbol of hope for the future. Sometimes they would pause to rest under the shade of a large tree. From there, they could see the hills stretching into the distance, the river winding like a silver ribbon, and the village where smoke rose from every home. In these moments, the women felt connected not only to the land, but to each other. They understood that their strength lay in their unity, and that together they could face the uncertainties ahead. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the village slowly came to life with evening activities. Women prepared food over fires, children played quietly, and elders shared their wisdom. Nava sat beside Sitara and Lela, listening as they spoke of the day's events, of tasks accomplished, and of plans for tomorrow. There was a sense of fulfillment in these conversations, a quiet satisfaction that came from living in harmony with one another. Night fell gently, bringing with it a calm silence. Stars sparkled above, and the moon cast a soft glow over the village. Inside the huts, women finished their chores, tucked children into beds made of soft blankets, and whispered bedtime stories. Nava's mother told her a story of a brave woman who had once traveled far and wide, learning the ways of different tribes and bringing back wisdom to her people. Nava listened with wide eyes, imagining herself following in those footsteps. Sitara held her child close, humming a gentle lullaby. She thought of the future, of the stories she would tell him, and of the values she hoped he would carry into adulthood. Lela, too, sat quietly by the fire, reflecting on her own life and the lives of those around her. Each woman in the village carried within her a quiet strength, a resilience that had been passed down through generations. The village, bathed in moonlight, seemed peaceful and safe. The women felt a deep sense of belonging, knowing that they were part of a community that valued life, respect, and harmony with the land. They also knew that the world beyond their village could be unpredictable and harsh. But for now, they were together, sharing the small joys of everyday life. And so the night passed quietly, with the women dreaming of the future, of children growing up strong and wise, and of stories yet to be told. Life in the village continued, simple and meaningful, filled with work, laughter, songs, and the enduring bond between the people and the land. Each morning promised new beginnings, and each night brought reflection, gratitude, and hope. The women did not yet know that their lives were about to change in ways they could never have imagined. But for now, they were free, connected to their ancestors, to each other, and to the land that had always been their home. In the quiet of the night, with stars shining above, the village slept peacefully, unaware of the challenges and trials that awaited them in the days to come. The morning air in the village felt different this day. A gentle breeze moved through the tall grasses, but there was a tension beneath the calm. Nava woke before the sun, her heart restless for reasons she could not name. She looked out across the plains, the horizon bathed in soft orange light, and wondered about the stories she had heard from elders, the tales of travelers, of people from faraway lands, and of times when outsiders had come close to the village. Sitara, too, noticed a strange feeling as she carried water to the central fire. She glanced around at the other women and children and found them quietly working, yet there was a weight in the air that made her uneasy. Even the birds seemed quieter than usual, their songs softer, as if they too sensed something was different. Lela, collecting herbs nearby, paused to look toward the hills, her sharp eyes scanning the distance. She had seen travelers pass through before, but today the shapes on the horizon seemed closer, moving in a way that was unusual. The first sign of change came with the sound of distant voices. They were low, hurried, and unfamiliar, carried on the wind. The women exchanged worried glances, and Nava's heart began to beat faster. She felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. Sitara called the children close, and the elders quickly gathered the villagers together. There was no panic, only quiet concern as they tried to understand the meaning of the sounds. From the edge of the village, a small group of outsiders appeared. They did not seem hostile at first. They were few, moving with careful steps, observing rather than rushing. But the elders knew better. They had long taught the children that strangers, even friendly-looking ones, could bring danger. The villagers moved cautiously, standing together near the center of the village. The women held the children close, their hands firm yet gentle, as they prepared for whatever might come. The newcomers spoke in a language the villagers did not fully understand. Their gestures were deliberate and their tone was firm. The elders tried to communicate, using gestures, calm words, and respectful expressions. Nava watched closely, curiosity mingled with apprehension. She noticed how some of the newcomers looked tired, carrying bundles and tools as if they had traveled far. The village elders tried to read their intentions, hoping for signs of peace. Despite the uncertainty, the women continued to act with strength and calm. Sitara offered water to the newcomers, using the quiet language of kindness that her mother had taught her. Lela handed over a small bundle of herbs, a symbol of welcome and goodwill. Nava, standing slightly apart, watched as her elders spoke, trying to understand the stranger's purpose. She felt a mix of fear and fascination. The world beyond the village was vast and unknown, and today that world had reached their doorstep. Time seemed to stretch as the two groups observed each other. The newcomers motioned toward the river, pointing to the water and to the path leading out of the village. The elders nodded carefully, explaining that the river provided water, that the village had its own traditions and rules. The women stayed close to the children, ready to protect them if needed. Even in uncertainty, they maintained the quiet dignity that had defined their lives for generations. As the morning moved toward noon, it became clear that the newcomers wished to accompany the villagers beyond the immediate area. They did not use harsh words or aggressive gestures, but their presence alone carried weight. The elders made the decision to guide them through certain parts of the village, explaining the paths, the sacred spaces, and the areas used for gathering food and water. Nava followed closely, trying to understand every gesture, every sign, and every word. She was aware that this day was unlike any other she had known. Throughout the interaction, the women remained composed. Sitara whispered to her child, explaining that sometimes people from far away would come, and that while some could be kind, others could bring change that the village had to face carefully. Lela spoke quietly to Nava, reminding her that strength was not only in action, but in observation, patience, and understanding. Nava felt a growing sense of responsibility. She realized that even as a young woman, she had a role to play in helping her community navigate this day. By late afternoon, the newcomers had made their intentions clearer. They wished to take some of the villagers, particularly the women, to show them new ways of life and to share knowledge. The elders understood that this request was part of a larger world beyond the village. They also knew it would be difficult, as leaving the village even temporarily meant leaving behind the land and the daily life that had sustained them. The women listened quietly as the elders discussed the decision, feeling the tension rise, yet trusting that wisdom and guidance would help them through. Nava, Sitara, and Lela were among the women chosen to go. Their hearts were heavy with uncertainty, but they also carried a sense of courage. They prepared small bundles of necessities, water, food, and personal items, and wrapped their children safely in slings. The village gathered to see them off, offering blessings and quiet words of hope. Elders spoke of the importance of patience, understanding, and kindness, reminding them that their strength was rooted in the love of their people and the traditions they carried. As they walked with the newcomers, Nava kept her eyes on the familiar landscape, memorizing the hills, the river, and the fields. Every step felt significant, as if she were leaving a part of herself behind while moving into an unknown world. Sitara held her child tightly, whispering songs to comfort him. Lela carried her herbs carefully, a symbol of continuity and life even in unfamiliar surroundings. The women walked steadily, guided by trust in their elders' decisions and by the quiet strength that had always defined their lives. The path led them through forests and plains, and the newcomers spoke softly, showing them the ways of travel, sharing knowledge about navigation, and explaining aspects of life in places far from the village. Nava listened with curiosity, learning quickly, yet always aware of the longing for home. Sitara and Lela did the same, carefully observing, asking questions when they could, and remaining calm even when the journey felt long and uncertain. Along the way, the women discovered small joys amid the challenge. They noticed the beauty of flowers along the path, the sounds of rivers and birds, and the gentle rhythm of walking in harmony with the land. They shared stories with one another during quiet moments, recalling lessons from their elders and imagining the future in places they had never seen. The journey, though uncertain, became a space for growth, reflection, and resilience. At night, they would rest together under the open sky. Nava watched the stars, remembering her mother's stories about constellations and the wisdom of ancestors. Sitara sang softly to her child, creating a sense of familiarity and comfort even far from the village. Lela tended to small fires, ensuring warmth and safety. In these moments, the women drew strength from one another, discovering courage they had not realized they possessed. Throughout the journey, the women noticed subtle differences in the world beyond the village. They observed different types of plants, changes in the soil, and the behavior of animals unfamiliar to them. The newcomers pointed out certain landmarks and explained their significance. The women absorbed this knowledge, understanding that adaptation and awareness would be necessary in this new part of life. Yet, even as they learned, they held tightly to the teachings of their village, the values of respect, patience, and connection to the land. The days passed slowly, each one filled with both challenge and discovery. The women kept their spirits high through shared stories, quiet songs, and acts of care for the children they carried. Nava found herself reflecting often, thinking about the village she had left, the elders' guidance, and the lessons she had learned. Sitara and Lela did the same, offering reassurance to one another and remembering the enduring strength that had always defined their people. By the time the group reached a place where the land opened into wider plains and distant hills, the women had learned much. They had adapted to a pace of travel they had never known, absorbed knowledge about the wider world, and discovered the depth of their own resilience. Each step had brought both challenge and growth, and although the journey had been unexpected, it had strengthened the bonds between them. Despite the calm they had found among themselves, a quiet longing for the village remained. Nava thought of her mother, Sitara of her friends, and Lela of the elders who had guided them. They carried the memory of home in their hearts, drawing strength from it as they faced each day. Each moment of uncertainty became a test of patience and courage, and each day offered an opportunity to learn, grow, and hold onto the values that defined them. As night fell over the plains, the women settled under the stars once more. They spoke softly, sharing hopes, dreams, and the lessons they had learned along the way. Nava realized that even in this new and unfamiliar world, there was space for courage, for care, and for connection. Sitara felt a quiet pride in the strength of the women around her. Lela smiled softly, remembering the village and the love that would always guide them. And so, the journey continued, a passage from the familiar to the unknown, from comfort to challenge, and from the safety of home to the lessons of a wider world. The women moved forward, carrying their heritage, their strength, and their hope, learning that courage is not only in facing hardship, but in maintaining dignity, compassion, and patience in every step of the journey. Though the road ahead was uncertain, the women knew they could endure. Their hearts held the wisdom of generations, their minds absorbed knowledge with careful attention, and their spirits remained resilient. In the quiet of each evening, under the soft glow of the moon and stars, they whispered the names of their village, honoring the home they had left behind and the people who had given them life, guidance, and love. The women had traveled for many days, moving through plains, hills, and forests. The landscape was different from their village, unfamiliar and vast, but it was also full of quiet beauty. Rivers sparkled in the sunlight, wildflowers dotted the hills, and the wind carried the scent of new herbs and grasses. Yet beneath this beauty, the women felt the weight of being far from home. They missed the village, the river where they washed, and the songs of the children playing among the huts. Nava noticed that even small things reminded her of home. The way the sun reflected on a river, the sound of birds she recognized, or the shape of a hill made her pause and take a deep breath. Sitara would often touch the ground with her hand, as if grounding herself in the earth, and whisper prayers to the spirits of her ancestors. Lela kept a small bundle of herbs close, a tangible connection to the traditions she had learned from her mother. These small rituals gave them a sense of comfort and continuity in a world that felt uncertain. The newcomers who accompanied them were not unkind, but their ways were different. They had their own routines, their own foods, and their own ways of doing things. At first, the women struggled to understand these differences. They had never traveled like this, never slept under the wide-open sky without the familiar structures of their village. But gradually, they began to notice patterns, learning how to follow the paths, set up simple shelters, and find clean water. Every day brought a new lesson, and the women adapted with quiet determination. The mornings often began with simple tasks. The women helped prepare food, collected water, and organized their belongings. Nava discovered that she had a natural talent for finding edible plants and herbs along the paths, just as she had in the village. Sitara focused on caring for the children, ensuring they ate well and stayed comfortable. Lela helped the newcomers with certain tasks, learning their methods while quietly sharing what she knew about the land. These routines, though different from the village, gave the women a sense of purpose and control. Evenings were a time for rest, reflection, and storytelling. Nava would sit by the fire, listening to Sitara and Lela share memories of the village, the elders, and the lessons they had learned. They would also tell stories to the children, teaching them about the land, the stars, and the importance of courage and kindness. These moments reminded the women of who they were and where they came from. They preserved their heritage, even as they adapted to new surroundings. At times, the journey brought challenges that tested the women's patience and resilience. The paths could be long and tiring, the days hot or cold, and the nights lonely. Children would cry from discomfort or fear, and the women had to soothe them while also attending to the needs of the group. Yet, even in these moments, they discovered inner strength. Nava realized that courage was not only facing danger, but also enduring discomfort with grace. Sitara understood that resilience came from caring for others and maintaining hope. Lela learned that wisdom could be found in patience and careful observation. The women also discovered new skills along the way. They learned to identify which plants were safe to eat, how to set simple traps for small animals, and how to purify water. They practiced building temporary shelters and making simple fires. These skills were different from the ones they had used in the village, but they appreciated learning them. They found pride in their ability to adapt, knowing that every new skill was a step toward independence and survival. Throughout the journey, the women also paid attention to the newcomers. They observed their routines, listening carefully to instructions and asking questions when they could. Nava was particularly attentive, noticing small details in their speech and gestures. She realized that understanding these new ways could help her group feel more comfortable and safe. Sitara and Lela did the same, learning not only for themselves but for the children who looked to them for guidance. Despite the differences, moments of connection began to form between the women and the newcomers. The newcomers showed respect for the women's knowledge of the land, asking questions about plants, water sources, and the paths. The women, in turn, shared what they could, quietly asserting their own wisdom and traditions. These exchanges were subtle but meaningful, creating a sense of mutual respect in an otherwise unfamiliar world. As days passed, the women found time for reflection. Nava often walked a little apart, thinking about the village and the stories of their ancestors. She imagined the fields, the river, and the huts filled with families. Sitara spent quiet moments with her child, teaching him songs and simple lessons she had learned at home. Lela wrote small symbols in the dirt, recording important events and ideas she wanted to remember. These small acts of reflection kept their spirits grounded and their hearts connected to home. The women also faced moments of doubt and fear. They wondered if they would ever see the village again, if the children would remember the songs of their elders, and if their traditions could survive in this new environment. These thoughts weighed heavily on them, but they did not let them take over. Instead, they used their worries to guide them, making careful choices and supporting one another. Nava would encourage Sitara, Sitara would comfort Lela, and together they found the strength to keep moving forward. One evening, after a long day of travel, the group arrived at a place where the land opened into a wide valley. The valley was peaceful, with a river flowing gently through it and hills rising on either side. The newcomers set up a temporary camp, and the women helped with tasks such as gathering firewood, preparing food, and caring for the children. The beauty of the valley brought a sense of calm. Nava felt a moment of awe as she watched the sunset, painting the hills in shades of orange and pink. Sitara and Lela shared her wonder, reminding each other that even in unfamiliar places, there was beauty and life. Night in the valley brought quiet reflection. The women sat around the fire, sharing stories of the village and the lessons they had learned along the journey. They spoke of courage, patience, and the importance of holding onto one's identity. Nava thought about the elders' words, remembering that strength came not only from action but from the heart. Sitara held her child close, whispering stories of kindness and bravery. Lela watched the stars, noting constellations she had learned from her mother. These moments strengthened them, reminding them of who they were and the traditions they carried. Over the following days, the women settled into a routine. They traveled, learned, and helped with daily tasks, finding small joys along the way. Nava discovered new ways to use herbs for cooking and health. Satara developed creative ways to teach the children, and Lela experimented with small crafts to keep herself occupied. Each day brought new knowledge, small accomplishments, and a growing sense of confidence. The women realized that even far from home, they could find purpose, joy, and hope. Occasionally, the women had moments to connect with the children in deeper ways. Nava taught simple songs and games from the village. Satara shared stories of the elders, and Lela showed how to make small items from natural materials. The children laughed, played, and learned, carrying pieces of the village's culture with them. The women understood that even in new surroundings, they could preserve their heritage through teaching, storytelling, and shared traditions. As the journey continued, the women also noticed subtle changes in themselves. Nava felt a growing sense of independence and confidence. Satara discovered patience and resourcefulness she had not realized she possessed. Lela learned to observe carefully, plan ahead, and solve problems calmly. These changes were not sudden, but they grew steadily, shaped by the challenges and experiences of each day. Even as they adapted, the longing for the village never left them. Nava thought of the river and the songs of the birds. Satara remembered the warm fires and the laughter of neighbors. Lela thought of the elders and the quiet strength of the women who had guided her. These memories became a source of comfort and motivation. They reminded the women that no matter where they were, the lessons of home would remain within them. The women also found ways to support one another emotionally. When Nava felt fear or doubt, Satara offered words of encouragement. When Satara felt overwhelmed, Lela shared practical solutions and quiet reassurance. When Lela felt lonely, Nava reminded her of their shared strength and heritage. These bonds, formed through shared experience and mutual care, became a source of resilience and hope. In the quiet moments, the women reflected on the journey and the lessons it had taught them. They realized that survival was not just about physical endurance, but also about maintaining identity, dignity, and hope. They discovered that courage could take many forms, from learning new skills to comforting a child, from observing carefully to teaching others, from sharing stories to simply continuing forward with patience. As the nights passed, the women settled into a rhythm of travel, learning, and reflection. They grew stronger, wiser, and more resilient, carrying the knowledge and values of the village with them. Even in an unfamiliar world, they found ways to adapt, to preserve their culture, and to protect one another. Their hearts remained connected to home, and their spirits remained unbroken. And so, life continued for the women on this journey. Each day brought new challenges, small joys, and lessons that would stay with them forever. Though they were far from the village, they carried the strength of generations in their hearts, the wisdom of elders in their minds, and the hope for the future in their spirits. They had learned that even in the face of uncertainty, resilience, courage, and kindness could guide them, helping them endure, adapt, and grow. The days had grown longer as the women continued their journey through unfamiliar lands. Though they had adapted to traveling and learning new skills, a sense of longing for their village remained in their hearts. Each morning began with the same routines, preparing food, gathering water, and helping with small tasks. But beneath the surface, the women carried memories of their homes, their families, and the songs of their ancestors. Nava often walked quietly apart from the others, observing the landscape and reflecting on what she had learned so far. She noticed the patterns of the birds, the flow of the rivers, and the subtle differences in the plants. She began to realize that understanding the land was not only practical, but also comforting. By learning these details, she felt a small sense of control and connection in a world that was otherwise unpredictable. Satara focused much of her energy on the children. Though they were far from the village, she found joy in teaching them simple lessons about nature, stories of their ancestors, and songs from their home. She noticed how the children responded to small acts of care, laughing at playful gestures, learning quickly from her instructions, and slowly growing more comfortable with the routines of the new environment. Satara understood that by guiding the children, she was preserving the culture of the village, even miles away from its heart. Lela, meanwhile, paid close attention to the newcomers' ways. She observed their methods for building shelters, finding food, and traveling efficiently. She did not adopt all of their practices, but learned what she could, keeping careful notes in her mind for future use. At the same time, she shared small pieces of her own knowledge: how to identify edible plants, how to find water sources, and how to teach the children about their own culture. She realized that sharing knowledge quietly could help maintain their identity, even in unfamiliar surroundings. The journey brought new challenges every day. The terrain was sometimes difficult, with steep hills, thick forests, and rivers to cross. Weather could be harsh, with sudden rain showers or hot sun, testing their endurance. The women had to balance care for the children, attention to the land, and cooperation with the newcomers. It was exhausting work, yet the women approached each challenge with patience and determination. They discovered that resilience was not only physical but also mental and emotional. During moments of rest, the women gathered to talk quietly among themselves. Nava shared what she had noticed about the land. Sitara spoke of the children and the lessons they were learning, and Lela offered guidance on practical matters. These discussions were calm and deliberate, allowing them to support one another, solve problems, and maintain their sense of purpose. In these moments, they discovered that strength could be found not only in individual effort, but in shared wisdom and solidarity. The women also found ways to preserve their culture despite being far from the village. Nava taught the children simple songs about the stars and the river, connecting them to the traditions of their ancestors. Sitara told gentle stories of bravery and kindness, reminding the children of the values that had guided the village for generations. Lela made small crafts from natural materials, using them as teaching tools to demonstrate lessons of patience, creativity, and observation. Through these efforts, the women kept the spirit of the village alive in the hearts of the next generation. Though the women were far from home, they noticed small joys in their surroundings. The beauty of a sunset, the sound of a river flowing, the laughter of children playing. These moments brought comfort and hope. Nava often took quiet walks to appreciate the subtle colors of the land. Sitara would hum soft songs to soothe the children, and Lela would quietly collect herbs, imagining the scents and textures of the village. These simple joys reminded them that life could still hold happiness, even in unfamiliar circumstances. There were also moments of worry and fear. The women sometimes wondered if they would ever return to the village, if the children would remember the songs and stories of their ancestors, and if their traditions could survive in the new environment. Yet these thoughts did not overwhelm them. Instead, they motivated the women to teach, to guide, and to preserve as much as they could. Nava, Sitara, and Lela realized that hope and patience were just as important as physical strength in sustaining their spirits. The newcomers continued to guide the women, showing them new skills and ways of life. The women learned to cook new types of food, use different tools, and travel more efficiently. At first, these lessons felt foreign, but gradually, the women adapted. They began to see the practical value in learning these new methods while still maintaining the traditions of their own culture. They realized that adaptability did not mean abandoning identity. It meant finding ways to survive and thrive while holding on to who they were. Evenings became a time for reflection and quiet bonding. The women would gather near the fire, sharing stories, songs, and memories. Nava often spoke of her favorite places in the village, describing the river, the hills, and the gatherings of families. Sitara told stories of her mother and the lessons she had learned from her elders. Lela shared memories of her childhood, the quiet wisdom of the women who had guided her, and the herbs and plants that were part of the village's knowledge. Through these conversations, the women maintained a strong connection to home. As the journey continued, the women noticed changes in themselves. Nava felt a growing confidence in her ability to observe and learn from the world around her. Sitara discovered patience and creativity in managing the children and caring for the group. Lela became more thoughtful and resourceful, finding ways to solve problems and support the others quietly but effectively. These personal changes were subtle but significant, shaping the women into stronger, more resilient versions of themselves. The children also began to adapt. They learned new games, remembered songs from the village, and observed the lessons taught by the women. Nava noticed how quickly they absorbed knowledge, blending what they had learned from home with what they were discovering on the journey. Sitara felt proud of their curiosity and resilience, understanding that the children's ability to adapt was a sign of the strength of the community and the culture they carried with them. The women also had to face difficult emotions. There were moments of sadness, when memories of home overwhelmed them or when they worried about the future. Nava sometimes sat quietly under the stars, thinking about the village, the elders, and the familiar paths. Sitara felt a quiet ache for the people she had left behind, wishing she could see their faces and hear their voices. Lela reflected on the lessons of patience and perseverance, finding strength in the knowledge that they could endure together. Despite these challenges, the women found ways to support each other. When Nava felt overwhelmed, Sitara offered comfort and reassurance. When Sitara felt uncertain, Lela shared practical guidance and encouragement. When Lela felt anxious, Nava reminded her of their shared strength and heritage. These acts of care created bonds that were deeper than friendship. They were a network of resilience, trust, and hope that helped the women endure each day. The landscape around them continued to offer both beauty and lessons. Rivers, hills, forests, and plains all carried knowledge if one paid attention. Nava learned to read the patterns of the birds, the direction of the wind, and the signs of approaching weather. Sitara observed how plants grew and which herbs were useful for cooking or comfort. Lela noticed how the land shifted with the seasons, teaching them when to move and when to rest. By observing carefully, the women turned each moment into a learning opportunity, finding safety and wisdom in the natural world. The women also discovered moments of quiet joy in their shared experiences. They laughed together over small mishaps, celebrated small accomplishments, and supported each other when tired or uncertain. Nava found happiness in teaching the children, Sitara in sharing songs and stories, and Lela in preserving the knowledge of their village. These moments reminded them that even far from home, life could be meaningful, joyful, and full of connection. As the journey continued, the women learned to balance hope and caution. They knew that the world beyond the village was unfamiliar and could be challenging, yet they also understood that they carried within them the wisdom, traditions, and strength of their people. Every step became a lesson in resilience, every challenge an opportunity to grow, and every quiet moment a chance to reflect on what truly mattered: family, culture, and connection to the land. Over time, the women realized that their journey was shaping them in ways they could not have imagined. They were learning patience, adaptability, and quiet courage. They were discovering that survival was not just about reaching a destination, but about maintaining dignity, preserving traditions, and supporting each other along the way. Each day became a chance to practice these lessons, to teach the children, and to strengthen the bonds between them. Even as they moved through unknown lands, the women's hearts remained tied to the village. Nava remembered the songs, the laughter, and the simple joys of home. Sitara carried the wisdom of her elders and the love for her child. Lela held the knowledge of plants, stories, and traditions, ensuring that these treasures would not be lost. Together, they carried the village within them, finding strength, hope, and purpose in every step of the journey. At night, under the stars, the women would gather and share their reflections. They spoke of the challenges they had faced, the lessons they had learned, and the small joys that had sustained them. Nava felt a quiet pride in their resilience. Sitara felt gratitude for the children and their ability to adapt. Lela felt hope, knowing that the traditions of the village would endure through their care, their teaching, and their presence. And so, life in this new chapter continued. The women faced challenges, but they also found joy, purpose, and meaning. They adapted to new ways of living while preserving their heritage. They cared for the children, supported each other, and drew strength from the wisdom of their elders. Though they were far from the village, they discovered that courage, patience, and love could guide them through even the most uncertain times. The journey that had begun so suddenly months ago was nearing its end, though the women could not yet be certain what awaited them. Every day had been a lesson, a test of patience, courage, and hope. Nava, Sitara, and Lela had learned to adapt to unfamiliar surroundings, to guide children, and to preserve the traditions of their village even in a strange world. Now, as the days grew shorter and the air cooler, the women began to feel a quiet sense of anticipation. Though they had faced challenges, the women also carried memories of beauty and calm. They had walked through valleys where the rivers sparkled in the sunlight, seen hills painted with flowers, and rested beneath skies filled with stars. Each moment had brought its own lessons and joys. Nava often recalled the songs of the birds, Satira remembered the laughter of the children, and Lela thought of the herbs and plants that reminded her of home. These memories were a bridge between the world they had left and the life that awaited them. The newcomers, whose ways had been so different at first, now seemed less distant. They had guided the women with patience, showing them methods of travel, shelter, and care that were unfamiliar yet practical. The women had learned much from them, not by abandoning their own culture, but by finding ways to blend new knowledge with the traditions they held dear. Nava realized that learning was not a sign of weakness but a form of strength. Satira found comfort in routine and consistency, while Lela saw the value in observing and reflecting on every detail. The children had grown more confident as well. They had learned new songs, games, and ways of understanding the world, while also carrying the lessons of their village. Nava took pride in how quickly they adapted, noting the sparkle in their eyes when they discovered something new. Satara smiled quietly as her own child laughed and explored, learning from the lessons of both the women and the newcomers. Lela taught small crafts and ways to use natural materials, ensuring that the children remained connected to their heritage. Even as the women adjusted, there was a quiet longing for the village. They missed the rhythm of everyday life, the shared work, the songs, the stories around the fires, and the connection to the land they knew so well. Nava thought often of the river where she had played as a child, Satira of the warm fires where elders shared wisdom, and Lela of the quiet paths where she had learned about plants and traditions. These memories reminded them of their roots and gave them the courage to face whatever lay ahead. One morning, as the group moved through a wide, open valley, they saw signs that they were approaching lands more familiar in style and structure. The hills and rivers reminded them of home, and the vegetation was similar to what they had once known. The women felt a mixture of hope and caution. They did not yet know if the village itself was near or if life had changed in ways they could not imagine. Still, the familiar sights brought a comforting sense of possibility. Nava's heart raced as she walked. Every hill, every bend in the river seemed to hold memories of home. Satira held her child close, whispering a quiet prayer of gratitude and hope. Lela's eyes filled with both longing and relief, knowing that the journey was coming to a point where the women might reconnect with what they had left behind. Even after all they had learned, the pull of the village remained strong, a reminder that home is more than a place. It is the people, the traditions, and the shared life that shapes identity. As the group approached a familiar path, they began to notice signs of village life. Smoke rose from hearths in the distance, and the sound of children's laughter reached their ears. Nava felt a lump in her throat, overwhelmed by a mixture of relief, joy, and caution. Satira clutched her child tightly, feeling tears of hope and gratitude. Lela walked with a quiet determination, ready to see the village once more, yet mindful of the changes that time might have brought. Upon reaching the edge of the village, the women paused. Everything looked the same, yet everything had changed. Some structures were newer, some older, and the people they saw were both familiar and strangers at the same time. The elders of the village, recognizing them from a distance, ran forward to greet them. There were tears, embraces, and quiet words of reassurance. Nava felt her heart swell as she reunited with people who had guided her from childhood. Satira breathed deeply, comforted by the presence of the familiar faces. Lela smiled softly, knowing that the journey had tested them but had also strengthened their connection to the community. The villagers listened carefully as the women shared their experiences. They spoke of the journey, the lessons they had learned, and the skills they had gained. Nava described the landscapes, the birds, and the rivers. Satara shared stories of the children, their growth, and their adaptation. Lela explained the knowledge she had gathered about plants, navigation, and survival. The villagers listened with a mixture of pride, wonder, and gratitude, realizing that the women had returned not only intact, but enriched by their experiences. Life in the village began to resume its familiar rhythm. The women returned to daily tasks, but they carried the lessons of the journey with them. Nava helped in the fields and with children, bringing her newfound knowledge of the land. Satira continued to care for the children, now with additional confidence and patience. Lela taught small groups of women and children about herbs, survival skills, and quiet ways of observing the natural world. The village began to feel whole again, strengthened by the experiences and resilience of those who had been away. Though life returned to a sense of normalcy, the women also understood that change was part of life. They had seen new ways of doing things, met people with different customs, and adapted to challenges they had never imagined. These experiences shaped them, giving them confidence, wisdom, and a deeper understanding of the world beyond the village. They realized that survival and resilience were not only about returning home, but about growing stronger through each challenge. The women also reflected on the importance of preserving their heritage. Nava shared songs and stories with the children, ensuring that they remembered the traditions of their people. Sitara spoke of patience, kindness, and courage, reinforcing the lessons taught by the elders. Lela demonstrated crafts and shared knowledge about plants and survival skills, keeping alive the practical wisdom that had been passed down for generations. In doing so, they ensured that even as life changed, the village's culture and values would endure. The elders recognized the value of the women's experiences. They encouraged them to share what they had learned with the community, not just in stories but in practical knowledge. Nava led small groups in observing the land, teaching children to notice details, follow patterns, and respect the environment. Sitara organized care for younger children, teaching patience and responsibility. Lela instructed women in the uses of herbs, methods for gathering food, and skills for everyday life. Through these activities, the women became teachers, guides, and role models, strengthening the community as a whole. The children, too, began to integrate the lessons learned on the journey. They remembered the songs, stories, and games taught by the women, combining them with traditions from the village. Nava watched with pride as the children explored the land, learning through observation and experience. Sitara noticed the children's growing confidence and independence, understanding that they carried the future of the village within them. Lela smiled quietly, seeing that the knowledge of the elders and the experiences of the journey would continue to shape the next generation. Over time, the women found peace. The memories of the journey remained, not as a burden, but as a source of strength. Nava often thought about the rivers, hills, and forests she had crossed, feeling gratitude for the lessons they had taught her. Sitara reflected on the children, the challenges she had overcome, and the growth she had witnessed in herself and others. Lela considered the knowledge she had gained and shared, understanding that learning and adaptation were part of life's ongoing journey. The village itself grew stronger because of the women's experiences. Their return had brought new skills, knowledge, and perspectives. The community became more resilient, better able to face challenges, and more connected to the world beyond its borders. The women's courage, patience, and wisdom had enriched the village, ensuring that the traditions and values of their ancestors would endure. As seasons passed, the women continued to teach, care for the children, and preserve the heritage of the village. They had faced uncertainty, adapted to new ways of living, and carried the lessons of the journey within them. Nava, Sitara, and Lela had grown in wisdom, strength, and patience, and they shared these gifts with everyone around them. The village, in turn, flourished, a living testament to the resilience and spirit of its people. At night under the stars, the women would sometimes sit together quietly, reflecting on how far they had come. They spoke softly of the landscapes, the rivers, the songs of birds, and the lessons learned on the journey. Nava felt a sense of accomplishment and gratitude, Sitara felt hope and contentment, and Lela felt peace and quiet pride. They had endured, adapted, and returned, carrying with them the strength of their heritage and the wisdom of their experiences. Though life had been unpredictable and challenging, the women understood that the journey had shaped them into stronger, wiser individuals. They had faced uncertainty with courage, adapted to new circumstances with patience, and preserved their identity through care, teaching, and reflection. The village had welcomed them home, but more importantly, they had carried the village within them throughout every step of the journey. And so, life continued in the village. The women taught, nurtured, and guided. The children grew with knowledge and confidence. The elders shared wisdom and offered guidance. The land, rivers, and skies remained familiar and nurturing. The village thrived, not just because of its traditions, but because of the courage, resilience, and heart of the women who had faced the unknown and returned stronger. In the end, the story of Nava, Sitara, Lela, and the other women became part of the village's living memory. Their journey, once filled with uncertainty, became a testament to patience, courage, and the enduring strength of human spirit. Through their actions, they ensured that the values of their people, love for the land, care for one another, respect for traditions, and hope for the future, would continue to guide generations to come. And though the world beyond the village had changed, the heart of the village remained alive in every song, story, and act of kindness, carried forward by the women whose lives had been shaped by courage, resilience, and hope.